and welcome to my 5-minute review of the VK30.01H. Taking a look at the tech tree here, the tank is a Tier 5 Heavy after the DW2 and leads on to both the Tiger and Panther line. Alright, so as we take a look at some of the stats on this tank, it does have 660 hit points, which is a very good amount of health. And in fact, the only other Tier 5 Heavy that has that much health is the T1 Heavy. So, very nice amount of hit points. It does weigh in right around 38 tons, which is fairly light for a Tier 5 Heavy. And with that 400 horsepower, that's going to mean that you have a specific power of around 10.5 horsepower per ton, which is actually fairly average. And you'll find that this thing drives a lot like the bigger heavy tanks, things like the KV1. The KV1, as you can tell, is much heavier, but yet it drives very similarly. And that's reflected in the speed limit of right around 35 kilometers per hour. So it's not super fast, even though it's a little bit smaller. Your traverse speed is 22 degrees per second, which is pretty slow. I mean, this thing really does handle like a heavy tank. It's kind of lumbering. Your turret traverse speed is 24 degrees per second. Again, pretty slow. Most German tanks have kind of slow turrets, and that's definitely true for this tank. When we look at your view range, you have a 360 meter view range, which is pretty good, and it's a little bit more than the KV1, sitting at 310. T1 Heavy has 330, so you've got a nice view range, and your signal range is really, really nice. 710 meters on that signal range. This does have a Tier 9 radio in it. Alright, so we've got Tank Inspector opened up here, and we're going to take a look at the armor on this tank. You'll notice on the front, very disappointing. You're sitting right around 50 millimeters of armor on the whole of this tank. Very light. A lot of things are going to be able to get through that, and it's very flat. On your turret, on the upgraded turret, you do have some decent armor. You're sitting around 80 millimeters on the front of your turret. You'll notice if we do angle this tank, you will get a little bit more armor out of that frontal armor. You're definitely going to want to angle this tank. On the sides, your tracks obviously act as spaced armor. Your hull, very thin, around 50 millimeters again. Your turret, around 60 millimeters. And the rear obviously is going to be fairly thin. So as you can tell, not a super heavily armored tank. Alright, so let's take a look at the gun on the tank. Now, the gun I'm showing you is actually not the fully upgraded gun, and the reason for that is that the fully upgraded gun is going to sit right around 9,000 experience, and for 9,000 experience, I mean, you're like a third of the way to the upgraded tank. Not to mention that this gun is basically very similar. You don't really get much of an upgrade, so this is the gun that I would recommend that you use. And so it's a 75 millimeter. It's got a very decent rate of fire, sitting right around 11.5 rounds per minute. Your penetration, very good, 150 millimeters of penetration. In a Tier 5 or Tier 6 battle, you're going to do really well with that. Your average damage is 135 hit points, which is not extremely high, but considering the healthy rate of fire, you're going to be able to do some good damage to people. Your accuracy is 0.35, which is really good, especially for a lot of heavy tank guns. Your aim time at 2.5 seconds is a little long, but as long as you let that aim really focus in, this is a very good kind of sniping gun. And that's really kind of where I see this tank fitting in. This is not a tank that you're going to want to drive right up into the front lines. Even though it's a heavy tank, you just don't have the armor for that. So you're going to want to use that really good signal range and that nice gun on there and just kind of sit back and shoot at people more. Alright guys, time for some final thoughts. Honestly, this is not one of my favorite tanks, and I would much rather drive the KV1, the T1 Heavy, or the Churchill over this thing. This is really set up as a sniper, and in that role, I'd much rather just use a tank destroyer like the Stug. So, if you have any questions at all about this tank, feel free to leave that down below in the comments. I'd be happy to help you guys out. And everyone, thanks for watching.